She was 18 years old and she'd just won the most important thing that had ever happened to her. Her name was Maya Santos, and she'd spent the last 4 years working harder than anyone she knew to earn a full scholarship to the most prestigious university in the country. She'd studied late into the night. She'd worked part-time jobs to help support her family. She'd pushed herself to the absolute limit of what her body and mind could endure. And it had paid off. The letter had arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Maya still remembered holding it in her shaking hands. She'd been afraid to open it because she was afraid that if she opened it and the news was bad, she couldn't take that kind of disappointment. But she'd opened it. And she'd read the words, "Congratulations. You have been selected as a recipient of the Presidential Scholarship. A full 4-year scholarship covering tuition, room and board, and living expenses." Maya had screamed. She'd cried. She'd called her mother and her grandmother and her best friend. She'd felt, for the first time in her life, like the universe was finally acknowledging that she mattered, that her hard work meant something, that she deserved something good. She had no idea that the universe was about to teach her a very different lesson. Before we start this story, I need you to do something. I need you to think about a time when you felt completely humiliated by someone with more power than you. I need you to think about a time when someone made you feel less than. I need you to think about a time when your dreams were dismissed because of who your parents were or where you came from. And then I need you to pay very close attention to what happens when someone discovers a truth that changes everything about how they understand themselves and their place in the world. This is the story of Maya Santos and Victoria Sterling. But it's also the story of what happens when the world is smaller and more connected than we realize. It's the story of what happens when assumptions are shattered. It's the story of privilege and poverty colliding in ways that no one expected. This will make you angry. This will make you cry. And by the end, this will make you understand something fundamental about who we are and who we could be. Let's begin. Maya Santos had grown up in a neighborhood where dreams were considered luxuries. Her mother, Elena, had been a housekeeper. She'd cleaned houses for wealthy families while her own house remained chaotic and struggling. Her father had left when Maya was 3 years old. She barely remembered him. What she remembered was her mother's sacrifice. Maya's grandmother, Rosa, had lived with them in a small 2-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood. Rosa had been a seamstress, beautiful, talented, struggling. She'd sewn clothes for people with money, earning just enough to survive. Together, the 3 of them had made a life. It wasn't much. The apartment was small. The furniture was second-hand. The food was often rice and beans. But there was love. There was laughter. There was the understanding that they were in this together. And there was education. Elena had made it clear to Maya from her earliest days that education was the way out. Education was the tool that could transform her life. Education was the thing that nobody could ever take away from her. So Maya had studied. She'd gone to public school, a school that was underfunded and overwhelmed, where half the teachers had given up and the other half were fighting an impossible battle against systemic inequality. But Maya had pushed. She'd gotten straight A's. She'd participated in every academic competition she could find. She'd built a resume that screamed, "I deserve better. I deserve more." By the time she was 18, Maya had applied to 23 universities. She'd gotten into 17 of them. But only one had offered her a full scholarship that would cover everything. Only one had looked at her application and had decided that she was worth investing in. That one was Ashford University, one of the most prestigious universities in the country, ranked in the top 5, attended by the children of presidents and CEOs and celebrities. The Presidential Scholarship was Ashford's way of showing that they cared about diversity. It was their way of showing that they believed in social mobility. Every year, they selected 5 students from low-income backgrounds and gave them full scholarships. Maya had been selected as one of those 5 students. When she'd received the acceptance letter, it had felt like her entire life had changed. Because it had. This scholarship meant she wasn't going to have to work 3 jobs while going to school. This scholarship meant her mother wouldn't have to work as hard to help support her. This scholarship meant that Maya's dreams, becoming a lawyer, helping people like her mother, working toward justice, Those dreams might actually be possible. She'd celebrated with her family. Her mother had cried. Her grandmother had held her and had said prayers of thanksgiving. They'd had a small celebration where Rosa had made her famous arroz con pollo, and they'd sat together and imagined Maya's future. None of them had any idea what was waiting for her at Ashford University. Maya arrived on campus on a bright August morning. Her mother and grandmother had come with her to help her move into the dorm. They'd packed everything they owned that might be useful for college into 2 suitcases. It wasn't much. Clothes from thrift stores. Second-hand textbooks. A laptop that was 5 years old, but that still worked. They'd walked around campus in awe. Everything about Ashford was designed to intimidate. The buildings were old and prestigious, covered in ivy, their architecture speaking to centuries of privilege and power. The campus was immaculate. Everything was clean and maintained and expensive. Elena had held Maya's hand as they walked. "You belong here," Elena had whispered. "Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong here." But even as she'd said it, both of them had known the truth. Maya probably didn't belong here. Not in the way that the other students belonged. She belonged here because she'd earned it academically. But she didn't belong here in any other way. She didn't have the right clothes. She didn't have the right background. She didn't have the right family name. When they'd gotten to the dorm room, they'd found her roommate already there, unpacking clothes that cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe combined. The roommate had been nice enough, but there had been something in her expression when she'd looked at Maya and her family that made it clear. "You're not like us." After Elena and Rosa had left, after Maya had hugged them and had promised to call every day, after she'd watched her mother's tears, Maya had stood in her dorm room and had felt utterly alone. The first week of classes, Maya had felt like she was drowning. Everything about college was different from high school. The expectations were different. The pace was different. The other students were different. Everyone at Ashford seemed to know how to navigate this world. They all seemed comfortable. They all seemed to belong. They all seemed to know instinctively how to act, how to speak, how to present themselves. Maya didn't know any of those things. She'd spent her entire life in a small neighborhood where everyone was like her. Working class, struggling, doing their best. She'd never been around rich people. She'd never been around people who talked about summer homes and ski trips and cruises like they were normal things that normal people did. She'd gone to her first class and had sat in the back. She'd listened to the professor lecture about Aristotle and Plato. She'd taken notes. She'd tried to understand. But then the professor had asked a question, and one of the other students had raised her hand and had given an answer that had made the professor nod approvingly. And Maya had recognized something in that student, not from seeing her in person before, but from seeing her in photos. This girl had been in the Ashford University promotional materials. She'd been pictured as the face of privilege, the daughter of the university's biggest donor. Her name was Victoria Sterling. And she was, apparently, perfect. Victoria was 18 years old, like Maya. She had expensive blonde hair that had clearly been professionally maintained. She wore clothes that cost more than Maya's entire monthly budget. She spoke with the kind of confidence that could only come from a lifetime of being told that your opinions mattered. Victoria had answered the professor's question perfectly. Of course she had. And the professor had smiled at her like she was the most important person in the room. Maya had felt something shift inside her. Envy, maybe. Or resentment. Or the beginning of understanding that the game was rigged from the start. The scholarship students had been assigned to live in a particular dorm, the diversity dorm, as it was whispered to be called. It was separate from the other dorms. It was older. The facilities weren't quite as nice. But it had been designed to help scholarship students find community with each other. Maya had bonded with the other 4 scholarship students. There was James, who'd grown up in foster care. There was Keisha, whose parents had both been incarcerated. There was Derek, who'd been homeless for 2 years before getting into Ashford. And there was Sophia, whose family had immigrated illegally and who lived in constant fear of deportation. The 5 of them had become a unit. They'd supported each other through the strangeness of Ashford. They'd studied together. They'd eaten together in the dining hall, always at the same table, always separate from the other students. They'd become a family of sorts. But it was a family built on shared struggle. And that shared struggle meant that they were constantly reminded that they didn't belong. There were small moments. A professor asking, "How much does your family's house cost?" In a casual conversation, then being shocked when one of the scholarship students mentioned they didn't have a permanent address. A group of students discussing their summer internships, all of which were at their father's companies or companies their parents knew about, and then looking uncomfortable when they realized that the scholarship students had to work retail jobs to earn money. There were uncomfortable conversations in the dining hall when students discussed how unfair it was that their parents had to pay full tuition when other students got scholarships. How is it fair that they get free education? One girl had said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "My parents are paying $80,000 a year and these people get it for free." James had gotten angry. He'd said, "Maybe it's because my parents died and I have nobody else to pay for my education. Maybe it's because I worked 3 times as hard as you did in high school just to have a chance. Maybe it's because the world isn't fair and the scholarship is trying to make it slightly less unfair." The girl had looked shocked, like she'd never been challenged before, like she'd never considered that her privilege might be someone else's injustice. But she hadn't apologized. These moments, small, everyday moments of exclusion and disrespect, had built up over the first few weeks of school. And Maya had felt them like water wearing away at a rock. Each moment was small, but together they were breaking something inside her. Then came the event that broke her completely. The Ashford University president was hosting an annual gala to celebrate the university and to thank donors. It was a formal event held at the university's most prestigious venue. It was invitation only, and the scholarship students had been explicitly not invited. But they'd learned about it anyway. They'd overheard conversations. They'd seen the social media posts, pictures of students dressed in expensive gowns and tuxedos, posing with their parents and the university president. And they'd understood the message. You don't belong here. You're not important enough. You're not part of this community. James had been angry about it. Sophia had been hurt by it. Derek had shrugged and said it was what he expected. Keisha had made a joke about it to deflect the pain. But Maya had felt something different. Maya had felt a burning need to understand why. Why weren't scholarship students invited to the gala? Why were they being so explicitly excluded? So she'd gone to the admissions office. And she'd asked. The admissions director, a woman named Rebecca, had shifted uncomfortably. "The gala is for our major donors and their families," Rebecca had said carefully. "It's a way to thank them for their support of the university." "But we're students here," Maya had said. "Doesn't that make us part of the university community?" "Of course," Rebecca had said. "But the gala is specifically designed as a donor appreciation event. You understand, I'm sure, that the university needs funding from wealthy donors in order to provide scholarships like yours. So in a way, the gala exists because of the donors. And you get to attend the university because of their generosity." Maya had understood what Rebecca was saying. She understood the logic of it. But she'd also understood what Rebecca was actually saying. You should be grateful. You should be grateful that rich people are generous enough to give you a chance. You should understand your place. And something inside Maya had rebelled against that. The night of the gala, Maya had stayed in her dorm room. Her roommate had gone. Of course she had. Her parents were major donors. She'd looked beautiful in her expensive gown. She'd mentioned casually that she hoped they wouldn't let too many scholarship students go to Ashford, because it brings down the standards. Maya had listened to this and had felt something break inside her. She'd decided to go to the event anyway. Not to attend officially, but to volunteer. There was always a need for student volunteers to help with events. They usually asked the scholarship students, free labor basically. And Maya had thought that if she was there, at least she could see what the gala was like. At least she could be part of the event in some way. So she'd volunteered. And on the night of the gala, she'd put on the black dress and white shirt that the volunteer staff wore. And she'd gone to help. The gala had been everything she'd expected and nothing she'd expected. The ballroom had been decorated with flowers that probably cost more than her family's entire monthly income. The food had been catered by chefs. There had been an orchestra playing classical music. And everywhere, there had been beautiful people in expensive clothes, celebrating their own importance. Maya had been assigned to work the coat check. She'd stood behind a counter, taking coats from people who barely looked at her, and hanging them on racks. She'd been invisible. Which was fine. She'd wanted to be invisible. But then Victoria Sterling had arrived. Victoria had come in a white gown that looked like it had been designed specifically for her. She'd had her arm linked with her father's, a man who Maya recognized from news articles as one of the wealthiest people in the country. Victoria had looked happy. She'd looked like she belonged. Of course she'd belonged. Everything about this event had been designed for people like her. Victoria had handed Maya her coat. She hadn't looked at her. She just held it out like Maya was a piece of furniture, an object to receive her coat. Maya had taken it, and she'd felt the fabric. Cashmere, probably. She'd felt the weight of privilege. And then Victoria had walked into the ballroom. Later that evening, Maya had gone to get Victoria's coat. The volunteer shift was ending, and she was returning coats to people as they left. Victoria had come to the coat check, laughing with a group of friends about something. Maya had retrieved her coat and had handed it to her. That's when it had happened. "Thank you," Victoria had said absently. And then she'd looked at Maya. Really looked at her. And her expression had changed. "Don't you go to Ashford?" Victoria had asked. Maya had nodded. "Why are you working coat check?" Victoria had asked. And there had been something in her tone that suggested the answer should be obvious. That Maya should have better things to do. That Maya was somehow wasting her potential by being a volunteer. "I'm a scholarship student," Maya had said quietly. "Scholarship students volunteer at events." "Oh," Victoria had said. And there had been a pause. And in that pause, Maya had seen something in Victoria's expression. Pity, maybe. Or disgust. Or just the acknowledgement of the unbridgeable distance between them. Then Victoria had done something that would haunt Maya for months. She'd pulled out her phone and had shown it to her friends. On the phone was a photo, the scholarship students in the diversity dorm, taken from some social media post. "These are the scholarship students," Victoria had said loud enough for Maya to hear. "They get everything for free. They get free tuition, free housing, free everything. And the university pays for it all." One of Victoria's friends had made a comment about affirmative action and how unqualified people were being let into the university. Victoria had laughed. She'd actually laughed. And then she'd looked at Maya. And she'd seen that Maya was there. That Maya had heard every word. "You're one of them," Victoria had said. Not as a question. As a statement of fact. As a statement of judgment. Maya had felt her face flush. She'd felt the humiliation wash over her. She'd felt dozens of people in the coat check area suddenly very interested in what was happening. "Yes," Maya had said quietly. "I'm one of them." "That must be nice," Victoria had said. Her tone had made it clear that she thought it was anything but nice. Her tone had made it clear that she thought Maya was undeserving. That she thought Maya had stolen something from people like her. Then Victoria had turned away. She'd put on her coat. She'd walked out with her friends, laughing about something else. And Maya had stood there, holding the counter for support, feeling like she wanted to disappear. The other scholarship students had heard about what happened. They'd gathered in Maya's dorm room later that night. And they'd all had stories of their own encounters with Victoria. She'd made comments in class about how some people just aren't cut out for Ashford. She'd posted Instagram photos captioned Diversity Day, while making faces at scholarship students in the background. She'd been, in every way, a symbol of the privilege and entitlement that made the scholarship students feel like they didn't belong. "She's the worst," Keisha had said. "She's everything that's wrong with this place." "At least we know who she is," James had said bitterly. "At least we can avoid her." But Maya had felt something different. Maya had felt a burning need to confront her, to make her understand what her words had done, to make her see that the scholarship students were real people with real struggles, not symbols of a social justice initiative. "I'm going to talk to her," Maya had said. "Don't," Sophia had warned. "She's not worth it. Her father could probably get you kicked out of Ashford if he wanted to." But Maya was beyond being able to let it go. It took Maya 2 weeks to find Victoria. Victoria clearly didn't want to be found. She'd blocked Maya's attempts to contact her. She'd avoided the places where scholarship students typically went. But Maya was determined. And eventually she'd found her. In the university library, studying in one of the private study rooms reserved for advanced students. Maya had knocked on the door. Victoria had looked up, surprised, and then irritated when she'd seen who it was. "Can I help you?" Victoria had said, not inviting Maya to sit down. "I want to talk to you about what you said at the gala," Maya had said. Victoria had rolled her eyes. "I said a lot of things at the gala." "About the scholarship students," Maya had continued. "About us being unqualified. About affirmative action." "And," Victoria had said, "that's what I believe." "Is that a crime?" "It's not a crime," Maya had said. "But it's wrong. You don't know anything about us. You don't know where we come from or what we've sacrificed to get here. You just assumed we were unqualified because we're poor." "I didn't assume anything," Victoria had said coldly. "I stated a fact. The scholarship program exists because the university wants to appear diverse. It's not because scholarship students are as qualified as regular students. It's because the university needs to look good." "I got a 4.0 GPA in high school," Maya had said, her voice shaking with anger. "I scored a 1590 on the SAT. I was in the top 0.1% of applicants. I'm qualified." "Then you're an exception," Victoria had said. "Most scholarship students are just here because the university is trying to be politically correct." Maya had felt the anger bubbling up inside her. She'd wanted to scream. She'd wanted to make Victoria understand. But she'd also realized in that moment that Victoria would never understand. Victoria lived in a world where her privilege was so complete that she couldn't even see it. She'd been taught to believe that poor people were poor because they didn't work hard enough. That if you were struggling, it was your own fault. "You're a terrible person," Maya had said quietly. And then she'd left. But something had changed in Maya when she'd left that study room. She'd gone back to her dorm room and she'd cried. She'd cried because she'd realized that no matter how hard she worked, no matter how smart she was, people like Victoria would never see her as an equal. No matter how much she achieved, she would always be the poor girl. The scholarship girl. The one who didn't belong. She'd called her mother that night. Elena had listened to the entire story. And when Maya had finished, Elena had said something that would change everything. "Maya, there's something I need to tell you," Elena had said. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." "What?" Maya had asked, confused by the sudden shift in her mother's tone. "Your father," Elena had said slowly. "I need to tell you about your father." Maya had felt her stomach drop. She'd spent 18 years not knowing her father. She'd asked about him when she was younger, and Elena had always deflected. She'd said that he wasn't part of their lives and that was all that mattered. "What about him?" Maya had asked cautiously. "He's not who I told you he was," Elena had said. "He didn't leave because he wanted to. He left because I told him to leave. And I told him to leave because his family would never have accepted me. Because they would never have accepted you." "What are you talking about?" Maya had asked. And Elena had told her a story that Maya had never heard before. Elena had been a housekeeper for a wealthy family when she was young. She'd been working in their mansion, cleaning their rooms, doing their laundry. And she'd met the family's son. His name had been Thomas Sterling. Thomas had been different from his family. He'd been kind. He'd talked to Elena like she was a real person. He'd asked her about her life and her dreams. And Elena had fallen in love with him. Thomas had fallen in love with her too. They'd had a secret relationship. They'd snuck around because they both knew that his family would never accept it. They'd talked about running away together. They'd talked about getting married and having children. And then Elena had gotten pregnant. Thomas had wanted to have the baby. He'd wanted to marry Elena. He'd wanted to be a father. But his family had other plans. His father had threatened to disown him. His mother had said that he was ruining his life. His family had made it clear that if he stayed with Elena, they would cut him off completely. No money. No inheritance. No access to the family fortune. So Elena had made a choice. She'd told Thomas to leave. She'd told him to go back to his family. She'd told him that their baby, Maya, would be fine without him. And Thomas had listened. He'd left. He'd gone back to his family. And he'd eventually married someone appropriate. Someone from a wealthy family. Someone his parents approved of. And he'd had another daughter. A daughter named Victoria Sterling. "He's your father," Elena had said quietly. "Victoria Sterling is your half-sister." Maya had felt like the room was spinning. She'd felt like she couldn't breathe. "Why didn't you tell me?" she'd asked. "Because I was protecting you," Elena had said. "I was protecting you from a family that would have used you. I was protecting you from the knowledge that your father had chosen his inheritance over you. I was protecting you from the pain of knowing that you had a family that would never claim you." "But I have the right to know," Maya had said. "You do," Elena had admitted. "And I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. But Maya, you need to understand something. The Sterlings are powerful people. And power corrupts. Thomas became a man I didn't recognize. He became cold and cruel and obsessed with money. And I realized that keeping you away from that family was the best thing I could do for you." Maya had sat with that information for a long time. She'd had a father all along. She'd had a sister all along. And neither of them had known she existed. She'd asked her mother for his contact information. Elena had refused at first. But eventually she'd given it to her. Maya had sat in her dorm room for 3 days with that phone number in her hand. She'd picked it up and put it down 100 times. She'd drafted text messages and deleted them. She'd practiced what she would say in her head until the words didn't make sense anymore. Finally, she'd called. Thomas Sterling had answered the phone like it was a business call. "Hello." "Hi," Maya had said, her voice shaking. "My name is Maya Santos. I think you might be my father." There had been a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Thomas had said, "How did you get this number?" "My mother gave it to me," Maya had said. "Elena Santos. She said you knew her. She said that I'm your daughter." Another long silence. "I don't know what your mother has told you," Thomas had said carefully. "But that was a long time ago. That's all in the past. And it's not something I'm going to discuss with a stranger." "I'm not a stranger," Maya had said. "I'm your daughter." "No," Thomas had said flatly. "You're not. I have one daughter. Her name is Victoria. And I'm not going to have a conversation about this." And he'd hung up. Maya had sat there, holding the dead phone to her ear, feeling like something inside her had died. But she couldn't let it go. She'd spent 18 years not knowing her father. And now that she knew, she couldn't just pretend that the knowledge didn't exist. So she'd researched. She'd found Thomas Sterling's social media. She'd found photos of his family. She'd found Victoria's Instagram account. And she'd stared at those photos, looking for herself in Victoria's face. And she'd found it. The same nose. The same eyes. The same shape of her jaw. They were sisters. And the world had no idea. Maya had gone to her next class and had sat next to Victoria. She'd done it deliberately. She'd wanted to see what it would feel like to be that close to her sister. Victoria had noticed. She'd looked at Maya with confusion. "Why are you sitting next to me?" Victoria had asked. "I wanted to talk to you," Maya had said. "I don't want to talk to you," Victoria had said coldly. "I have nothing to say to scholarship students." "I think you do," Maya had said. "I think there's something you need to know." "I don't need to know anything from you," Victoria had said. She'd gotten up and moved to a different seat. So Maya had tried a different approach. She'd sent Victoria an email. The email had said, "I need to talk to you about your father. It's important." Victoria had not responded. So Maya had waited for Victoria after class. And she'd pulled her aside. "Your father's name is Thomas Sterling," Maya had said. "Obviously," Victoria had said. "What's your point?" "My mother's name is Elena Santos," Maya had continued. "She was your father's girlfriend. Before your mother." Victoria had stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that your father had a relationship with my mother," Maya had said. "And they had a daughter. Me." Victoria had laughed. Not a kind laugh. A shocked, disbelieving laugh. "You're insane," Victoria had said. "My father would never." "He did." Maya had interrupted. "My mother was his housekeeper. They fell in love. They were going to get married. But your grandparents didn't approve, so he left my mother to go back to his family. And my mother had me alone." Victoria had stepped back. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Why would you make up something like that?" "I'm not making it up," Maya had said. "I'm telling you the truth. We're sisters. Half-sisters. And I deserve to know my father." "You're a liar," Victoria had said coldly. "And frankly, I don't care if you are his daughter. If you are, then you're a product of his mistake. You're something he got rid of. You're someone he chose to abandon." And then Victoria had walked away. But something had changed. Maya could see it in the way Victoria had stiffened. In the way she'd tried to cover her shock with anger. Victoria had believed her. Or at least, Victoria had believed her enough to be disturbed by it. The news had spread through the campus within hours. By that evening, everyone was talking about it. The scholarship girl who claimed to be Victoria Sterling's half-sister. The dramatic family secret. The hint of scandal in the Sterling family. Social media had exploded. Some people had believed Maya. Some people had thought she was a liar trying to get attention. Some people had been fascinated by the drama of it all. Victoria had gone silent. She'd stopped coming to class. She'd stopped posting on social media. Her friends had stopped being seen with her in public. And her father had gotten involved. Thomas Sterling's lawyers had sent a letter to the university. They'd demanded that Maya cease making claims about a family relationship. They'd threatened legal action if she didn't stop spreading false and defamatory statements. The university had gotten nervous. They'd called Maya in for a meeting with the admissions office and the university lawyer. "We need you to stop making these claims," the admissions director had said. "Whether they're true or not, they're becoming disruptive to the university community." "They're true," Maya had said. "My mother can prove it. My father." "We don't care," the lawyer had said. "We need this to stop. The Sterlings are major donors to this university. And if they decide to stop donating, that could affect the scholarship program. Which could affect your scholarship." The threat had been clear. So Maya had gone to the one person who might be able to help her. The one person who had a stake in this beyond money or reputation. She'd gone to Victoria. Maya had shown up at Victoria's sorority house. She'd asked for her at the door. And after a long wait, Victoria had come downstairs. They'd stood facing each other in the entrance of the sorority house, with curious girls watching from upstairs. "I need to tell you something," Maya had said. "And I need you to actually listen." "I'm not interested," Victoria had said. "You should be," Maya had said. "Because I found something. I found proof." And Maya had shown Victoria a letter. It was a letter that Elena had written to Thomas the day Maya was born. It had never been sent. But Elena had kept it all these years. In the letter, Elena had told Thomas about his daughter. She'd told him that he had a choice. He could be a father or he could be wealthy. She'd told him that she wouldn't force him to choose. And Thomas had chosen wealth. Victoria had read the letter. And something inside her had broken. "This doesn't prove anything," Victoria had said, but her voice had wavered. "Yes, it does," Maya had said. And you know it does. Because you can see yourself in me. Because you've known all along that there was something familiar about me. Because deep down, you know I'm telling the truth. Victoria had handed the letter back to Maya. And she'd sat down on the steps. And she'd cried. I don't want a sister, Victoria had said through her tears. I don't want to know that my father is a terrible person. I don't want to know that I'm half something that I don't want to be half of. I know, Maya had said, sitting down next to her. But you are. And I am. And that's not either of our faults. They'd sat there together, two girls who were sisters and strangers, trying to figure out what that meant. After that, everything had changed. Victoria had gone to her father. She'd shown him the letter. And she'd told him that he needed to acknowledge Maya, or she would make the entire story public. She would go to the media. She would tell everyone about how the Sterling family had abandoned a child. Thomas had refused at first. But Victoria had been serious. And eventually, Thomas had realized that he had no choice. The truth was coming out. He could either acknowledge it on his own terms or have it destroyed his reputation. So he'd called Maya. And they'd talked. Not as father and daughter. That relationship was too damaged, too broken. But as two people trying to understand a complicated situation. And Thomas had made a choice. He'd made a financial contribution to the scholarship program at Ashford University. A very large contribution. One that would ensure that scholarship students would never be excluded from university events again. One that would fund a scholarship specifically for students who'd overcome adversity. He'd also written a public statement. It had been simple and honest. I had a daughter that I didn't acknowledge. That was wrong. I'm trying to make it right. Maya had graduated from her first year at Ashford with a 4.0 GPA. She'd gone on to become a lawyer focused on social justice. She'd used her story to fight for the rights of scholarship students and low-income students. She'd become an advocate. Victoria had changed too. She'd stopped going to parties where scholarship students were excluded. She'd started volunteering with the scholarship program. She'd become someone who used her privilege to help others rather than to exclude them. The two of them hadn't become close friends. Their backgrounds were too different. Their experiences were too far apart. But they'd become something, allies maybe. Sisters, eventually. They'd learned to see each other as whole people rather than as symbols of privilege or poverty. At the gala the following year, the first gala where scholarship students were explicitly invited and celebrated, Maya and Victoria had stood together. Elena had come. She'd worn a beautiful dress that her mother Rosa had sewn for her. And she'd watched her daughter stand beside her half-sister, the two of them together, speaking about the importance of second chances and the power of inclusion. Thomas Sterling had watched from across the room. He'd made his mistakes. He'd hurt people. But he'd finally started to make them right. And Maya had understood something fundamental. She'd understood that privilege isn't always a choice. But how you use privilege, that is a choice. And every day, people like Victoria could choose to use their privilege to help others instead of to exclude them. Every day, people like Thomas could choose to right their wrongs. Every day, people like Maya could choose to fight for justice instead of accepting injustice. So here's what I want to ask you in the comments section. Have you ever judged someone based on their wealth or their poverty? Have you ever made assumptions about someone's intelligence or worth based on how much money they had? Have you ever felt like an outsider because of your economic status? Have you ever had a belief about someone completely overturned by new information? Have you ever realized that you were wrong about something fundamental? Have you ever benefited from privilege without even realizing it? Have you ever thought about what advantages you've had that others haven't had? Have you ever considered using those advantages to help someone else? Rate this story from 0 to 10. Tell me if it resonated with you. Tell me if you've experienced economic discrimination. Tell me if you have a family secret that changed everything about how you understand yourself. But most importantly, tell me this. What are you going to do differently after hearing this story? Are you going to think twice before judging someone based on their economic status? Are you going to consider using your privilege to help others? Are you going to fight for a more just system? Because that's what this story is really about. It's about the invisible barriers that separate us. It's about the ways that economic inequality shapes who gets to succeed and who doesn't. It's about the power that we all have to change that. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications. Because there are so many stories like this one. Stories about people from different backgrounds discovering unexpected connections. Stories about privilege and poverty colliding. Stories about people learning to see beyond their assumptions. And if you're struggling with economic inequality, if you're feeling like you don't belong, if you're wondering if you're worthy of success, I want you to know you are. Your worth is not determined by your bank account. Your value is not determined by your family name. You are worthy of love, of respect, of opportunity. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I'll see you next time.